January 1944, Northern New Guinea. Morning fog still clung to the treetops when the metal crackled beneath his boots. A thin sheet of corrugated tin, dented, rusted, barely holding onto the rafters of an abandoned coastal hut, became his perch. Below him, the jungle murmured with distant insects and the low rumble of Japanese patrols shifting along the valley trail. He lay flat, feeling the roof tremble with each slow breath. The position had been dismissed by every man in his platoon. Too exposed, too noisy, too unstable. A sniper was supposed to sink into the earth, not climb above it. But the soldier had watched this village for days. He had seen the gap between the palms, the exact line where patrols funneled out from the ridge. From ground level, it was invisible. From the rooftop, it was a corridor. The sun pushed higher, heating the tin beneath him until it felt alive. Then he saw movement, shadows slipping between broken fences. He steadied the rifle. The first shot echoed across the valley, followed by a second. Within minutes, the tin roof. Idea nobody believed in would begin rewriting the rhythm of that front line. And to understand how this moment became possible, we must step back to the world that shaped it. By early 1944, the campaign in New Guinea had entered a brutal phase of attrition. The jungles north of Finchhafen and along the Huon Peninsula had become a maze of ravines, kunai grass plains, and scattered settlements with tin, roof-trading huts left behind from pre-war coastal activity. For Allied infantry pushing through these dense corridors, every ridgeline concealed danger, and every footstep carried the weight of unseen eyes. Japanese forces, primarily elements of the 20th and 51st Divisions, had mastered the terrain. Their patrols moved silently along narrow tracks carved between palm groves, slipping through small abandoned villages to maintain supply routes and reconnaissance lines. Allied commanders struggled to predict these movements. Maps were often outdated, aerial reconnaissance limited by canopy, and ground scouts faced ambushes with every approach. In these conditions, even a single sniper's vantage point could shift the balance along an entire sector. Standard doctrine, however, discouraged high-angle positions in the Pacific. Rooftops made of tin were loud, unstable under body weight, and easily exposed against sunlight. Heat rising off metal warped scope clarity. The glare could reveal a shooter instantly. And a single burst of machine gunfire could punch straight through the thin roofing. For most units, such positions were dismissed before they were even considered. The soldier at the center of this story had seen the landscape differently. His training emphasized patience, elevation, and understanding movement patterns, skills sharpened during months of fighting through the Markham and Ramu valleys. Where others saw risk, he saw geometry. The tin roof hut sat at the edge of a clearing angled toward a shallow rise. Through that rise ran a narrow track Japanese patrols used to rotate between forward outposts. From the ground, the angle was blocked by brush. From the roof, it opened into a clean lane. His request to use the rooftop had been rejected more than once. Officers cited visibility, structural weakness, and the danger of collapse under fire. Snipers were expected to blend into roots, logs, or jungle depressions, not climb onto open sheets of metal. So the idea lingered in silence while enemy patrols continued their steady rotations. But frontline conditions rarely reward rigid thinking. As pressure mounted along the valley and Japanese movements increased, this unconventional vantage point began to matter. And there were several angles to how it unfolded. For days before he climbed onto the roof, the soldier had been operating on the edge of exhaustion. The humidity pressed against his lungs, clothing clung to his skin, and sleep came in restless fragments interrupted by patrol warnings or distant artillery. Yet what weighed on him most was the feeling that his unit had lost its grip on the valley. Japanese scouts kept moving through the same corridor, slipping past Allied lines unseen. Each time a patrol passed without being intercepted, the front line tightened like a closing fist. From his shallow ground positions, the sniper could only catch partial silhouettes, flashes of movement, the blur of helmets between trees. He knew the track existed. He could hear footsteps on damp soil, hear clipped orders drifting through the palms. But he could never make the shot with certainty. Every missed opportunity felt like a failure he carried alone. The abandoned hut with the tin roof haunted his thoughts. Each time he studied the landscape, his eyes drifted to it. Elevation, angle, sightline, everything aligned. But to pursue it meant challenging the judgment of men above him, men who had survived long enough to distrust anything unconventional. Still, the sense of responsibility gnawed at him, pushing the idea into something he could no longer ignore. It was that inner pressure, the quiet moral burden of letting patrols slip past, that set the stage for what came next. Militarily, the tin roof angle broke several accepted principles of jungle warfare. Snipers were taught to stay below the canopy, using shadows and natural barriers to remain invisible. A roof, particularly a metal one, offered none of that. But tactically, the position offered something rarer: reliable predictability. Japanese patrols in this sector moved in consistent intervals. Their doctrine emphasized reconnaissance without disruption, meaning they passed through the same clearing each time. Same spacing, same formation, same tempo. From the ground, Allied eyes caught only fragments. From elevation, the entire formation could be tracked from entry to exit. The roof gave the sniper a low forward-facing slope. Lying prone, he could position himself just below the ridgeline of the metal sheet, reducing his silhouette. The angle allowed his rifle barrel to rest flush against the descent, stabilizing it despite the tin surface's natural vibration. And the elevation meant he could fire down into the corridor rather than across it, reducing the visual obstruction of jungle layers. It was a vantage point that violated the rules but matched the terrain perfectly. Tactical logic favored it even if tradition did not, and that tension between doctrine and reality defined the next angle. The soldier's rifle, likely a Springfield M903A4 or similar variant used by Allied marksmen in the region, was not designed for unstable platforms. Its scope required steadiness, eye relief, and minimal vibration. But the tin roof introduced unique challenges. Heat shimmer rising off the metal distorted the view after sunrise. The roof flexed with the slightest shift in weight, and every movement produced faint metallic pops that could betray his presence. Yet the rifle's strengths aligned with the problem. Its bolt-action design produced less recoil disruption than semi-automatic platforms. It allowed the sniper to operate slowly, deliberately, maintaining control even on a surface that threatened to ripple beneath him. The scope's clarity at mid-range distances, 150 to 300 meters, was ideal for the narrow track he intended to cover. Temperature was the largest threat. Metal heated quickly in New Guinea's sun, and by mid-morning the roof could become scorching. But the sniper compensated by choosing his moment carefully, aiming to engage while the roof was warm enough to avoid morning condensation, yet not hot enough to distort the field of view. Technology didn't favor the tin roof angle, but it didn't forbid it either. With skill and discipline, it could be made to work, and that possibility led to the next angle: leadership. Allied officers in the region operated under immense pressure. Each decision risked ambushes, sudden counterattacks, or casualties caused by terrain rather than combat. In this environment, predictability meant safety. A sniper on a roof was not predictable. It was volatile, unprotected, and visible to any observer who happened to glance upward. Leadership feared what a single mistake could cost. If the roof collapsed, they would lose a trained marksman. If Japanese troops spotted him, they could pin down the platoon with heavy fire. And if his shots missed, the patrols would scatter into the jungle, making future engagements harder. So when the soldier proposed the roof angle, the answer was cautious dismissal. Officers acknowledged his instincts but emphasized caution, wishing to avoid unnecessary risks. Sniper doctrine existed to protect valuable personnel, not encourage improvisation under unpredictable conditions. But as Japanese movements intensified and reports continued to indicate rising patrol frequency, leadership faced a dilemma. Their established positions were failing. The roof idea, while unorthodox, was the only perspective that offered a new line of sight. Leadership didn't authorize it. But they no longer intervened when the sniper prepared the plan himself. And on the other side of the valley, the enemy's actions made the final angle inevitable. Japanese patrols in this sector relied on speed and routine. Their forward units were stretched thin, forcing small groups, usually 6 to 12 men, to rotate duties between ridge observation posts and supply points along the valley. To conserve energy, they moved along the same path repeatedly, trusting concealment from the thick palms and the predictable quiet of abandoned settlements. They had passed through the clearing so many times without resistance that the route felt safe. The hut with the tin roof barely registered in their awareness. Roofs, in their doctrine, were irrelevant in jungle warfare, too exposed, too fragile to hold a threat. Their attention stayed on ground shadows, root clusters, depressions, and tree lines. This complacency led them straight into the sniper's future field of fire. Their spacing, rhythm, and formations were consistent enough that he could anticipate when each man would emerge. Their reliance on routine, once a strength, became a vulnerability. And as the patrols continued their predictable passages through the clearing, the stage was set. One soldier, one unconventional angle, and a narrow corridor of movement were about to collide. All 5 angles converged onto a single decisive moment. The moment came just after 0800 hours. Low morning haze drifted off the palms, and the valley settled into the brief stillness that often preceded movement. The sniper approached the hut alone, carrying only his rifle, a canteen, and a strip of burlap he had torn from an old supply sack. He laid the burlap across the tin roof to reduce glare, then eased his weight forward until the metal flexed beneath him. The sound was faint, just a soft tick of shifting nail heads, but he froze, listening. Nothing stirred. From his position, the track appeared like a narrow ribbon of darkened soil threading through the green. This time the angle was perfect. No brush obscured the line. No vines hung in the way. He adjusted his cheek weld, exhaled slowly, and scanned the corridor. Then he saw them. The first Japanese point man emerged from the tree line, moving with the habitual vigilance of someone who had walked this path hundreds of times. Behind him came 2 more, followed by the main body spaced evenly apart. A textbook patrol. Predictable, confident, unaware. The sniper steadied the crosshairs on the lead soldier's chest. The roof trembled softly under his breath, but the rifle remained anchored against the slope. He fired once. The shot cracked through the air, rolling across the valley in a sharp metallic echo. The point man collapsed instantly. The patrol froze. The second shot followed before they could react. The third came as 2 soldiers attempted to break for cover. Each round found its mark. Panic rippled through the formation as men dove behind tree trunks or dropped to the ground, unsure of where the fire originated. The elevation concealed the muzzle flash. The angle, compressed by jungle layers, distorted the sound's origin. In under a minute, 7 enemy troops lay motionless. But the attack wasn't over. Additional patrol elements, hearing the gunfire, rushed into the corridor from the north ridge, unknowingly entering the same fatal line of sight. The sniper shifted only a few inches, sweeping the track as if turning a narrow beam of light. One by one, silhouettes appeared. One by one they fell. When the rifle finally fell silent, the valley seemed to exhale. The tin roof was blistering hot beneath him, and the smell of spent powder hung heavy in the air. He had fired with precision, discipline, and an angle no one had trusted. 19 enemy troops now lay across the clearing, and the consequences of that moment spread quickly through both sides of the front line. When the firing ceased, the silence across the valley felt unnatural, too sudden, too complete. Allied soldiers positioned along the secondary line looked toward the clearing, unsure if the attack had been repelled or if their sniper had been overrun. It wasn't until they saw the faint silhouette on the rooftop shift, lowering the rifle, that they understood what had happened. Word spread inward through the platoon like a quiet current. He got them, all of them. Patrol reports confirmed the impact within the hour. The Japanese units operating along the ridge had been struck sharply at their weakest point, during a rotation, when their numbers were exposed and their formation routine. The loss of 19 troops in a single engagement disrupted communication for 2 full days. Their forward scouts withdrew deeper into the jungle, abandoning the predictable corridor they had relied upon for months. The valley, once threaded with enemy movement, fell unnervingly still. For the Allies, the reaction was measured but unmistakably shifted. Officers approached the hut in disbelief, studying the angle, the burlap cloth, the rifle marks along the tin surface. What had seemed reckless now appeared calculated. The position they rejected had produced one of the most effective small unit actions in that sector. Reports were drafted noting the engagement, documenting the shot sequence, and recording the casualty count. Nothing was embellished. It didn't need to be. The sniper himself remained quiet, offering only the essential details: distance, timing, formation, and corrections made between shots. He emphasized the predictability of enemy movement, not his own role. Those who spoke with him recalled no celebration, only relief. Relief that the corridor was finally shut down and that the responsibility he carried had lifted. In the days that followed, the platoon adjusted their deployments. With the patrol route crippled, Allied units advanced more confidently through the valley, establishing stronger observation posts and pushing pressure toward the ridge. Supply movements improved. Ambush frequency dropped. The single action on that tin roof had shifted the tactical rhythm of the entire area. But beyond the material gains, something subtler changed. Officers began paying closer attention to unconventional suggestions from the men who watched the terrain hour after hour, and soldiers saw what could happen when one perspective, once dismissed, proved decisive. The implications of that morning would echo far beyond the clearing. In the quiet days that followed the engagement, the tin roof hut became more than a point on a map. It became a reminder of something deeper: how war, despite its structures and doctrines, is shaped by the instincts of individuals who learn to read the ground with their own eyes. Manuals could outline principles. Commanders could issue orders. But no written rule could account for the subtle ways terrain, timing, and human intuition intertwined on the front line. The sniper's choice revealed a truth visible across countless battles of the Pacific. The environment often dictated its own form of logic, understood only by those who lived inside it day after day. In that sweltering valley, a sheet of rusted tin became a tool of war not because it was ideal, but because it aligned with reality. Adaptation had replaced orthodoxy. Observation had overcome routine. Historically, moments like these rarely make headlines. They appear instead in reports, in passing references from platoon diaries, or in recollections that surface years later. Yet they form the backbone of the broader campaign. Small decisions that redirect patrol routes, unsettle enemy units, or shift the psychological balance between two forces locked in attrition. 19 enemy soldiers lost in a single volley may not rewrite the arc of the entire war, but it reshapes the immediate world of those who fought within that valley. There is also a human reflection in the story. The sniper did not climb the roof seeking recognition or vindication. He climbed because he could no longer ignore what he saw every day: a pattern of movement, a weakness in the enemy's routine, and a responsibility to act on it. Courage in war often looks less like bold charges and more like quiet decisions made alone, moments where risk is weighed not for glory but for necessity, and so the tin roof stands as a symbol, not of luck or defiance, but of clarity. A recognition that understanding the battlefield sometimes means disregarding what is expected and trusting what is observed. In the vast and violent expanse of World War II, such clarity was rare, fleeting, and costly. But when it appeared, it could alter the shape of a valley, the safety of a platoon, or the fate of a single morning. The war moved on from that clearing, but the lesson remained. Sometimes the angle no one believes in becomes the one that changes everything.